from Nigeria, and like if you didn't know anything about Nigeria, people from Nigeria don't speak Nigerian. There are a bunch of tribal languages, so like a lot of different tribes speak a lot of different languages. So my mom, and my dad are from the Igbo tribe, and one big difference is I don't speak Igbo at all. I know maybe 5 or 10 words because my mom and dad didn't feel like it was prior to have me speak my native language. They wouldn't just let me grow up here and speak English only. So like when I'm at home and my mom and dad are having hour-long conversations in Igbo, or my uncles or aunties, people in my church are speaking Igbo, I don't speak that language at all. So that's a definitely a very big difference.
The biggest thing I would say is ever since I immigrated here, it's just been me and my mom. Because my dad works in China and he usually comes back for 2 months just to chill with us, and he leaves and stay in China for another 3 months, and just like 2 or 3 months period. I would say the biggest thing is like we're not as tight as we were back in China, just because like I have work, I have school, my mom has work. We both need to adjust when we first immigrated here, and my dad obviously back in China. I would say at most is a call a week or 2 calls a week. I would say that's the biggest difference. Yeah.
I love doing extracurriculars. And when I had the chance to do those in high school, my father was like, why are you doing all these things? You should be paying attention to your studies. You shouldn't be doing all these like superfluous stuff. And I was just like, 2 things. 1, I like it. And 2, in America, you have to be very well decorated to show how well-rounded you are. Versus back home, it's school, 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 and when you can rest. But here, that's taken as being lazy and not knowing what time management is. And trying to explain that to someone who, grew up back home, where things are literally the complete opposite that they are here, is very hard.
I haven't really noticed much of a difference or impact. I think having my mom come from a different country and immigrating to America, it made me more sensitive to my peers and to more social issues and more political issues. So I keep up with that, and I like to educate my peers about the different immigration problems as well.
Growing up, I never really did experience that gap of being racially different than anybody else, and it's probably just because my family and I have just grown up to be so Americanized at this point that I've never really been able to feel that gap where I'm not as American as someone else from my school. For example, if some people tend to speak in a different language, I would never have been able to do that. I would simply just talk English all the time. Or if I sometimes talk about Chinese food, I don't know that many Chinese, I don't know much Chinese food, so I wouldn't have been able to even talk about Chinese food with another person that like knew Chinese food really well. I would just talk more about American food. I like more American food, and I really haven't felt that social gap. I've always been surrounded by more white people than Asian people, and even when I am surrounded by Asian people, in general, they are more Americanized just because of where I'm from.
Like it would be Black History Month, and it's very important to learn about Black history no matter where you're from in the diaspora. But they'd be talking about Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, and those aren't my ancestors. They aren't people that I really have connections to. Even though I am part of the diaspora, it's not like they're not. My mom and dad didn't grow up in the civil rights era in America. They weren't there. They weren't a part of segregation or like a lot of. They came as like transplants. So I think something that's really uncomfortable is when I try to discuss like racial issues with my mom and dad, and they have so much of a different view because they simply didn't live through it. Where they think that everything that's happening in Black America is brought on by Black Americans, and I just have to tell them that's not true. Like systematic racism is real, and it's not just in their heads. It's not because they're lazy. It's because the kind of system holds them down a lot, and we don't really see that.
It was a very white town, plus not a lot of people. So before I came into high school, everyone knew each other, so I was like left out. Plus I didn't know the language too well. I had to go through the whole ESL process. So I don't know, freshman year was a sad year. I sat by myself in the lunch period, went home by myself, you know, not a typical high school life, but that's what I experienced. But I worked my ass off to work on my English skills freshman, sophomore year, I would say, and I didn't really put myself out there until junior year, where I found a couple of my very close friends now. Unlike other people who just like ask me, "Oh, you're from China? How's it back there?" and didn't really care much. They were the one that really cared. They helped me out during class. They after school they invited me to hang out with them to the house. Even for exams we studied together. You know, those things that really like make you think like, oh, there's good people out there that really will help you out. I don't want to say it's like because we're that different. I would say like because I'm different, they wanted to help me out. It's not like it's not like other people who just like acknowledge that I'm different and just leave it there.
I encountered a lot of like aggression or just ostracizing from my like Black American peers, because as if it wasn't weird enough, I was second generation American. Certain words said in American English differ from certain words said in Nigerian English with accents and just different connotations. You couple that with me being raised on Led Zeppelin, Eric Clapton, Pearl Jam, old R&B, rap from like the 80s, and you get a very weird kid like me. And since my parents were listening to this stuff back home, I didn't really have a lot of friends growing up, not till I learned to identify myself as like Nigerian American or even just a regular person and accept those things about me.